My preposition, supposition, or supposition is that there's a small group of people with dyslexia and or ADHD who have severe central sleep apnea. Now, this group of people have these problems because of visual snow. The second thing I want to make a correlation between was visual snow and the blue field effect. Basically, visual snow is caused by a back pressure in your eyeball and low blood flow through your eyeball. This causes your eye to distend, and that causes a static. I believe this is caused by the white blood cells dragging on the inside of the veins inside your eyeball. Now, the blue field effect is when you can see the white blood cells by looking at a blue sky. Think of it like having a fire hydrant with a garden hose hooked up, turned on high. It just doesn't work. The static being generated by your eyeball is sent to your visual cortex, in particular your lingual gyrus, which is involved in visual processing and letters. Basically, your lingual gyrus is being overstimulated, and that causes things like photophobia, sensitivity to light. My sensitivity to light was so bad that looking at a piece of paper under fluorescent lights for 45 seconds would give me a migraine. I basically spent my entire school career hunched over a piece of paper with my arm wrapped around it to block out as much light as possible. So now that you know what it is, the next question is, how do you get rid of it? You have three choices. The first is to go to your primary care physician, and they'll go, when you tell them about visual snow, so you want to email them ahead of time, they're not going to know much about it. The second way is to go to a neurologist, and they may have heard of it. And since it's a neurological disorder, i.e. the static being misfiring of your cones and rods, they'll have a clue. But the person who's going to actually treat that before they talk to you is a neurooptometrist. And they're about as rare as visual snow. In the Portland area, there's one, Dr. Kundart, at Pacific University. He knew what it was straight off the bat when I emailed him. So as far as your eye is concerned, there's three medications used to treat it. Acetazolamide, which is an anti-seizure medication that also lowers your blood pressure. It also is used for a water pill for mountain climbers. Lamotrigine, which is an anti-seizure medication. These two open up the veins of your eyeball. And the third one is Verapamil. This reduces the blood pressure in your eye and allows the blood to flow through easier. Now, the first two, I've tried all three. And the first two, I tried the acetazolamide first. It didn't agree with me. I may have been just anxious because I really wanted it to work, but it made me nauseous. So after 3 weeks, I went off it. I was at 125 milligrams. And the prescription plan for this is to start out with 250 milligrams and work way up to 1,000 milligrams in 2 weeks. So I don't know if it would work for me or not, or if it was just me. Lamotrigine, you're working way up to 200, 300 milligrams. This takes a while. You start out at 25 milligrams for the first 2 weeks and go up 25 or 50 per week until you get to 150. And at that point, for me, the static smoothed out and slowed down. What I recommend you do is do the first 2 weeks. And if you're not getting any side effects, then go ahead and go up 50 milligrams per week. At 150 milligrams, you should see that happen. It's get it slow down and get out of focus. It took another month for it to really kick in, and then another month after that to really kick in. So it takes a while, but it works really well. If the acetazolamide worked for you, then that's going to take you 2 weeks to find out. Now, the Verapamil is a blood pressure medication. You're supposed to start out with that at 50 milligrams and move up to 180 milligrams. That's the base level of the recommended prescription for it, up to 240 milligrams. I didn't really see a change until I got to 220, and it dropped my blood pressure by 5, and I'm currently at 260, and I got to give it another week to see if it's going to lower it anymore. Now, this didn't really help with the static visually. It got it to be minimal, but it's not getting rid of it with my eyes closed. Both of these are not affecting it with my eyes open. But I've historically gotten 6 hours of sleep per week. I went on one sleep aid and I got 2 hours a night. And then I went on 2 sleep aids and I got up to 3 hours and 20 minutes a night. Then I went on Lamotrigine and that got me up to 420. And currently, about 3.5 months later, being on Lamotrigine and Verapamil, I'm currently at a 7 and 40 minutes sleep in an 8.5 hour sleep period. And compared to before, I'm getting a whole lot more deep sleep. So these medications work and they will help you out a great deal. I feel a lot more relaxed. I feel a whole lot more rested because I'm actually getting sleep. So if you see the static, you really need to address this. It'll help you out a lot. Blue field effect, I mentioned before, is related to your white blood cells, and you see them in your vision when you look at a blue sky or a bright cloudy sky. If you can find the right color and you put it on your TV, you can also see it there. Now, originally I had it all my life, obviously, and it would be fast and there wasn't much of it. I mean, there wasn't many. And as I've lowered my blood pressure and opened up my veins, it slowed down, and instead of being a constant speed, it pulses with my blood pressure. It has quadrupled in the amount. I'm able to get it in focus where before I couldn't. That's why I believe the eye has been distended. The second type of visual snow is brain-based. Now this either can be the traditional static or it can be the phase type that looks like raindrops on the windshield. I expect in the future they'll find more causes for visual snow. If you know some that aren't mentioned in this video, please let me know and I'll update my next video. Low blood pressure can be the cause of visual snow. There's not enough oxygen or nutrients getting to your visual cortex. 1 in 4 people have been helped with their visual snow by raising their salt intake, and that needs, of course, to be regulated by a doctor. Lactate and pyruvate are used in moving nutrients into your visual cortex. What happens with this is that the lactic acid builds up inside your brain, and that's because the nerves are not getting enough lactate and pyruvate. So like when you exercise and then you sit down for 5 minutes and you get up and your muscles are sore, you have a buildup of lactic acid in your muscles. The same thing can happen in your brain, causing visual snow. Concussions, neck and back injuries can cause visual snow. Sleeping the wrong way one night can cause you to get the visual snow the next day. If that occurs, then you want to stretch your spine by using an inversion table, because you don't want to do that 2 nights in a row because it has worsened the person's visual snow. I and people who I know who are the fuzzy people also have scoliosis to a certain extent. So I think that may be a coexisting problem. Now, the inversion tables really do work for straightening out your spine, and normally you can get one on Craigslist for free. Increased cerebral spinal fluid pressure. Basically, there's too much pressure in your head and it's pushing down on your brain. In order to test for this, you have to go to a neurologist and they take you into a hospital, give you an MRI, and then they do what's called a spinal tap or lumbar puncture. Drain out a little fluid and measure the pressure in your spine, and then that determines whether or not you have too much pressure in your skull. Treatment for this is periodic draining of a certain amount of fluid from your spine, which lowers the pressure in your head, insertion of a drain tube permanently, or medication to lower the swelling of your brain. I started Poofy Hair Productions back in 2004 to help the people who see the fuzzies. This particular group is highly intelligent, highly creative, and highly hyper. They have the ability to think about not 1, not 2, but 3 separate and distinct things at the exact same time. They have their primary thought process, which they talk and read and write and all that. The second thought process doesn't shut up. So if you hear a lame song, it will repeat the lyrics all night, all day long for up to a week in a row. And the third thought process, which you can utilize if you concentrate. So you can be on a conference call, be involved in the conference call, and think about 2 separate and distinct things at the exact same time. Now, for the average person, this would drive them nuts in about a week, because we're seeing constant static, you have massive sleep deprivation, and you have a second thought process that won't shut up. With your eyes closed, you see it. With your eyes open, you see it. You got to read while you have a verse of a lame song repeating in your head in the background while you're trying to read something or write something or talk to somebody or solve a problem. The sleep deprivation is probably the worst part about it. The reason why we have 3 thought processes is due to 2 problems with 3 neurotransmitters: dopamine, serotonin, and neonorepinephrine. The 2 problems is that we have low levels and that they reuptake. So think of it as nerve A going to nerve B with a chemical signal, and instead of going to nerve B, it comes back to nerve A. And those 3 chemical transmitters, we have 10 to 30%. Now, this causes us to develop a second and third thought process. That's why our brain goes so much faster than you, and you think we are scatterbrained when we're actually done with what you're going to say to us halfway through, and we want to get to our answer so we can answer you so we can get on with it. Think of it like you're driving a Yugo up the block, around the corner, up the block, around the corner, up a block, around the corner. I'm in a Porsche 911. I pass you before you get done with the first block and up around the corner and back and back and back. And then I pass you again before you get to the second block. So how do you get rid of it? Well, I realized back in 2004 that these are the two problems and that doctors treat one or the other. They give you a stimulant like Adderall and you feel better, but you obsess about stuff. So you tell your doctor you're obsessing about stuff, and then they give you an antidepressant like Prozac. So you stop feeling good and you go back and forth and back and forth. It's a two-part problem. Doctors, they just love symptoms. You give them a symptom, they'll give you a treatment. The way you get rid of it, I took me about a month and a half. I took a stimulant, Adderall, plus an antidepressant, Prozac, at 25 milligrams for Adderall and 10 milligrams for Prozac. And it took me about a month and a half, and I was down to one thought process. As previously stated, I'm down to one thought process, and I cannot think about anything at the time at any time. I can stop thinking about stuff and just do things and solve problems. I don't have to ruminate on what the problem is or another issue altogether. So by doing that, you'll be able to get down to one thought process. I was on meds for about a year and a half, and it solved my problem. Now, a couple other things. Hand tremors, being that you see static, you have hand tremors because the world's constantly moving. You can reduce that with beta blockers, which are used for high blood pressure. You want to go in and tell them it's an academic problem because you can make a swirl just fine, but you try to write your name and it's all shaky. When I started Poofy Hair Productions back in 2004, I went ahead and looked at every single vitamin and trace mineral that were related to dyslexia and ADHD, or as I should say, hyperattention disorder, because I'm not deficit in ability to pay attention. We've been had. The two most important ones were liquid trace minerals. Solaris has one that I use and it worked well. And chromium picolate, or picolinate if you're from England. These do four things. Reduce the size, speed, and amount of static. They also reduce the contrast. Now what I mean by contrast is people with dyslexia have blue static, and people with ADD and ADHD have salmon to purple colored static. I'm a severe dyslexic, so I can't get rid of it by tinting my glasses, but people with less severe dyslexia and people with ADHD can find out their specific color static they see and get their glasses tinted. This is covered on my website. Basically, you're using Finder in icon view, and then you can find your specific color static by stopping the page for moving. Calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D. These help with your short-term memory, and I found that I would eat cashews a lot. And when I started taking taking magnesium in particular, it helped reduce the cravings for that. Also, I am a salmonivore. I eat huge amounts of salmon, and that's a part of it. The other thing with salmon is it's the fatty acids in it through omega-3. Now, calcium, in order to absorb calcium, you have to take half as much magnesium. In order to absorb magnesium, you have to take equal amounts of vitamin D. Basically, taking 1,000 milligrams of calcium will just go straight through your system. So you have to take half as much magnesium, which would be 500 milligrams. And in order to absorb the magnesium, you have to take vitamin D, which is roughly 10,000 UI. Now, I've gone up to 40,000 UI of vitamin D, and that helps with my dry mouth. And if you have a wet nose, it'll help with your wet nose. It helps regulate the moisture in your mouth and nose. The other main thing is omega-3 fatty acids, and these are part of your brain function, especially as a receptor for serotonin and dopamine. It's also very important for your brain health and your well-being. This is after what was coming before, which is after what's now, which is actually recorded before from Run It Now. And I've gotten the static down to the point where, with my eyes closed, it's again minimal, and it has a red shower behind it, which is slowed down. I'm almost halfway there. I can see the static, the red shower static, with my eyes open in a dimly lit room, looking at my monitor. I just turned off the lights and I was getting up to leave, and there it was. It's not like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's not everywhere. You kind of have to focus on it. It's not annoying at all. The other things that you need to expect are the diminishment for the inhalation of chocolate and food. Chocolate won't go away, but you'll take a lot less of it, and you'll start drinking less water as well. When I was up to 150 milligrams on Lamotrigine, the static went out of focus from time to time with my eyes closed, and I could focus on the background, if you know what I mean. It would have a vertical shower of static that was red and blue. It wouldn't be nearly as annoying as a regular static, and it would be darker. It basically went a little bit faster than the speed of one of those wall sculptures where they put a piece of stone on the wall and run water down the front of it. After I got on Verapamil, it improved some more with time, and that was Lamotrigine and the Verapamil together. Now, I finally went up to 260 milligrams on Verapamil and with 300 milligrams on Lamotrigine, and that's when I got 6 hours of sleep a night. I've gone up to 350 milligrams on Lamotrigine with 260 on Verapamil, and the static is pretty minimal with my eyes closed. The vertical shower of static in the background is dimmer and less, and it's slowed down. So I'm expecting to be able to get rid of the static. I'm a dog, and this is my bone, and I'm going to knot down to the marrow. I don't want this to be in my life anymore. It needs to go away.
Zappe, zappe!
This has been a Poofy Hair production.